The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as the grand chamber of the Galactic Council filled with representatives from 1,000 worlds. Bioluminescent beings floated near the vaulted ceiling, while crystalline entities refracted light across polished floors. At the center of it all stood High Chancellor Zavros, his forearms gesturing gracefully as he called the emergency session to order. Among the delegates sat Counselor Trevan of the Meridian Collective, a being whose translucent form shimmered with nervous energy. Beside him, the stoic Ambassador Kelthane from the Iron Worlds maintained his characteristic stillness, his metallic features betraying no emotion. These were the voices that shaped galactic policy, the minds that had maintained peace for 3 millennia. Today they gathered to discuss something unprecedented: humanity. The holographic display at the chamber's heart flickered to life, showing a small blue world spinning peacefully in the darkness. Earth, third planet from an unremarkable yellow star, home to a species that had only recently mastered faster-than-light travel. To most gathered here, it should have been nothing more than a footnote in the great chronicle of spacefaring civilizations. Zavros began speaking, his voice carrying the weight of genuine concern rather than his usual diplomatic pleasantries. The humans had been observed for decades now, studied from afar as they took their first stumbling steps into the cosmic arena. What the surveillance teams reported back had initially seemed amusing, then concerning, and finally, deeply troubling. The first images showed human vessels, crude by galactic standards but functional. Trevan leaned forward, his luminous eyes studying the designs. There was something about them that felt wrong, aggressive in a way that most species avoided. Where other races built their ships for efficiency and beauty, humans had created weapons that happened to travel through space. A delegate from the harmonious sphere spoke up, her melodious voice carrying a note of confusion. Why, she asked, would the Council concern itself with such a primitive race? They had barely colonized their own star system. They possessed no weapons that could threaten even the least advanced Council members. Their diplomacy was clumsy, their technology derivative, their culture fractured and violent. Zavros acknowledged her points with a gentle nod, then gestured to his aide, a young Viridian named Solace, whose role was to present the collected intelligence. What followed was a presentation that would shatter the comfortable assumptions of every being present. The humans, Solace explained, did not approach space travel the way other species did. Where most races saw the cosmos as something to be explored and appreciated, humans viewed it as something to be conquered. Their history was written in blood and fire, an endless cycle of conflict and innovation driven by that conflict. They had split the atom not to power their cities but to destroy their enemies. They had reached their moon not for scientific curiosity, but to prove dominance over their rivals. The hologram shifted, showing footage captured by covert observation drones. Human military exercises played out before the assembled council. Ships maneuvered with a precision that spoke of countless hours of combat training. Weapons fired in patterns that suggested tactical doctrine refined over centuries of warfare. This was not a species learning to defend itself. This was a species that had perfected the art of destruction and was now bringing those skills to the stars. Kelthane, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. His voice resonated like struck metal, cold and analytical. He had reviewed the reports thoroughly, he said, and found himself reaching an uncomfortable conclusion. The humans were not just another warrior race. The galaxy had seen plenty of those, species that valued strength and martial prowess. No, the humans were something different. They were survivors who had learned that the best way to ensure survival was to eliminate threats before those threats could fully materialize. Trevan's form pulsed with agitation. He argued that the Council was overreacting, that humanity could be guided toward peaceful coexistence through proper diplomatic channels. They were young, impulsive perhaps, but surely they could be taught the ways of civilized interaction that had kept the peace for so long. Zavros allowed the debate to continue, watching as various delegates weighed in with their perspectives. Some shared Trevan's optimism, believing that any species could be elevated through patient mentorship. Others sided with Kelthane's caution, noting that humanity's rapid advancement suggested an adaptability that could make them dangerous if provoked. A few dismissed the entire discussion as paranoid speculation about a species that posed no real threat. Then Solace presented the final piece of evidence, and the chamber fell into stunned silence. The footage showed a human diplomatic vessel approaching a pirate outpost in the frontier sectors. The pirates, members of the Kravax Syndicate, had been operating with impunity for years, too mobile and too violent for Council peacekeepers to effectively suppress. They had made the mistake of attacking a human colony transport, killing 300 civilians. The human response had been swift and absolute. Their diplomatic ship, it turned out, was carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. They did not negotiate. They did not attempt to bring the pirates to justice. They simply broadcast a single message, a warning that the Kravax had 30 seconds to abandon their station. Then they opened fire. The delegates watched in horrified fascination as the human weapons reduced the outpost to molecular debris in less than 5 minutes. The efficiency was remarkable, the brutality undeniable. But what truly disturbed the Council was what came next. The humans did not celebrate their victory. They did not boast or make threats. They simply transmitted the footage to every known Kravax cell with a message: humanity protects its own. Within a month, pirate attacks on human vessels had dropped to 0. Savros let the implication sink in before speaking again. This, he said, was why they needed to reconsider their assumptions about these newcomers. Humanity did not play by the established rules because they did not know those rules existed. More troubling, they might not care even if they did. They operated on principles forged in the fires of their violent history, and those principles were now being applied to galactic politics. 3 standard cycles passed after the Council's emergency session. The delegates had voted to implement what they called the Observation Protocol, a series of guidelines for interacting with humanity. Approach with caution, avoid provocation, report all significant contact. It was a compromise between those who feared humans and those who thought the fears overblown. It was also, as events would soon prove, entirely inadequate. The Zephron Dominion had not attended the Council session. They rarely did, considering themselves above the bureaucratic concerns of lesser species. The Zephrons were an ancient race, their empire spanning 12 star systems, their technology refined over 10,000 years of unbroken civilization. They had achieved a level of cultural and scientific advancement that most species could only aspire to reach. They were also, as it happened, fatally arrogant. When Zephron survey ships discovered humans establishing a mining operation in the Outer Terrace, a region the Dominion had claimed but never actually occupied, they saw an opportunity to assert their superiority. Lord Commander Zephyron, leading the Dominion's 7th Fleet, decided that these upstart humans needed to learn their place in the cosmic hierarchy. He sent a message to the human mining station, written in what the Zephron considered generously simple terms. The humans were to cease operations immediately, abandon their equipment, and withdraw from Dominion space. Failure to comply would result in the destruction of their facility and any vessels that remained in the system. The human response came from someone named Captain James Horvath, commander of the mining station's small security detachment. His message was brief and decidedly ungracious. The humans had filed proper territorial claims with the Galactic Registry. They had invested significant resources into establishing this operation. They had no intention of abandoning it because some species they had never heard of decided to make demands. Furthermore, Horvath added with what Zephyron considered shocking insolence, if the Zephrons wanted them gone, they were welcome to try removing them by force. Zephyron was so outraged by this reply that he immediately ordered his fleet to advance. 12 capital ships, each one a masterpiece of Zephron engineering, moved into attack formation. Their weapon systems, refined over millennia, charged to full power. Their shields, capable of withstanding the output of a small star, shimmered into place. This would not be a battle, Zephyron thought with satisfaction. It would be a demonstration, a lesson taught to children who had forgotten their manners. The human mining station seemed to agree. As the Zephron fleet approached, most of the facility's personnel evacuated aboard transport ships that jumped to faster than light speed almost immediately. Horvath and his security team remained behind, along with what appeared to be the station's entire complement of mining equipment. Zephyron opened a channel, offering one final chance for surrender. He expected begging, perhaps offers of tribute or promises of future compliance. Instead, Horvath appeared on screen looking almost bored. He asked if the Zephrons were really going to do this, if they truly believed their fancy ships and ancient pride made them invincible. When Zephyron confirmed that the station would be destroyed, Horvath simply shrugged and said something that would be repeated across the galaxy in the days to come. He said, "All right then, let us show you what humans do to bullies." The mining equipment, as it turned out, was not mining equipment, or rather it had been, until Horvath's engineers spent the last 3 days converting it into something else entirely. Humanity had a long history of turning industrial tools into weapons when circumstances demanded. It was a skill they had practiced extensively during their own world wars, and they had lost none of their talent for creative destruction. The first Zephyron ship to enter weapon range discovered this when what looked like a simple ore processor fired a stream of superheated metal fragments traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The Zephyron shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, proved less effective against kinetic projectiles. The ship's hull breached in 14 places before its captain could even order evasive maneuvers. Zephyron watched in disbelief as his fleet came under fire from modified mining lasers, explosive excavation charges launched like missiles, and even a gravity manipulator that had somehow been weaponized to create localized spatial distortions. The humans were not just fighting back. They were doing so with equipment they had jury-rigged in less than a week. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The Zephyron fleet possessed superior technology, better shields, more powerful weapons, and crews trained in the elegant art of space warfare as practiced by civilized species. The humans had desperation, creativity, and a complete willingness to ignore every conventional rule of engagement. When Zephyron targeting computers tried to predict human movements, the humans moved unpredictably. When Zephyron commanders attempted to force the humans into defensive positions, the humans attacked instead. When standard tactics failed to work, Horvath's team invented new tactics on the fly, some of them so reckless that they bordered on suicidal. 3 hours into the engagement, Zephyron found himself facing a choice he had never imagined he would need to make. His fleet had lost 4 ships, 3 more were critically damaged, and the humans showed no signs of running out of improvised weapons or insane strategies. He could press the attack and likely achieve victory through sheer attrition, but the cost would be unacceptable. Or he could withdraw and face the humiliation of retreating from a species the Dominion had dismissed as primitive. Before he could decide, Horvath contacted him again. The human captain looked tired now, his face streaked with sweat and soot, but his eyes still burned with defiant energy. He had a proposal, he said. The Zephyrons could leave immediately, and the humans would not pursue. They would even help repair the damaged ships if the Dominion requested assistance. But if the Zephyrons continued their attack, Horvath promised that humanity would ensure every spacefaring race in the galaxy learned how the mighty Dominion had been fought to a standstill by a mining station. Zephyron made his decision. The 7th Fleet withdrew. News of the battle spread quickly despite the Dominion's efforts to suppress it. Within days, the Galactic Council found itself flooded with inquiries about humanity. Species that had ignored Earth now wanted to establish diplomatic relations. Others requested information about human military capabilities. A few, those who had their own territorial disputes with neighbors, quietly began reaching out to human governments to discuss potential alliances. Zavros convened another emergency session, and this time every single delegate attended. Traven, who had argued for patient mentorship, looked shaken as he reviewed combat footage. Kelthane, who had urged caution, seemed almost vindicated, though there was no satisfaction in his metallic features. The humans had not sought this conflict, but they had proven beyond doubt that they could and would fight when pressed. The aftermath of the Zephyron incident rippled through the galaxy like waves across a still pond. In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, representatives who had once viewed humanity with amused condescension now spoke in hushed, uncertain tones. The balance of power, so carefully maintained for thousands of years, had been disrupted by a species that had been spacefaring for less than a single generation. Counselor Dahlia, a being of pure thought from the transcendent realm, proposed a radical idea. Instead of observing humanity from a distance or attempting to contain them through diplomatic pressure, perhaps it was time to actually talk with them. To understand not just what they were capable of, but why they approached the universe so differently from every other known species. The Council agreed, and an official invitation was extended to Earth's government. A delegation would be welcome to address the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. The humans accepted immediately, though their response included a request that made several delegates uncomfortable. They wanted to bring Captain James Horvath as part of their team. When the human delegation arrived at the council station, they were not what anyone expected. There was Ambassador Rachel Okonkwo, Earth's official representative, a woman whose diplomatic credentials were impressive by any standard. There was Dr. Felix Zhang, a xenobiologist who had spent years preparing humanity for first contact. And there was Horvath, still wearing his mining station security uniform, looking decidedly out of place among the splendor of the council chamber. Zavros welcomed them formally, his forearms spread in a gesture of openness and peace. He spoke of the council's desire for understanding, for finding a way forward that would benefit all species. He acknowledged that perhaps the council had been too quick to judge humanity based on incomplete information. He invited Ambassador Okonkwo to speak, to help them understand Earth's perspective. Okonkwo stood and delivered a speech that had clearly been prepared with great care. She spoke of humanity's hopes for peaceful coexistence, their eagerness to learn from older, wiser civilizations. She acknowledged that humans could be violent, but argued that this violence always arose from fear, from the defensive instincts of a species that had survived countless existential threats. Given time and proper guidance, she insisted, humanity could become responsible members of the galactic community. It was exactly what the council wanted to hear, and several delegates visibly relaxed. This was manageable. This was familiar. A young species eager to be accepted, willing to learn the proper way of doing things. The tension that had gripped the chamber since the Zephron incident began to dissipate. Then Horvath asked if he could say something. The captain walked to the center of the chamber, his boots echoing on the polished floor. He did not speak with the practiced eloquence of a diplomat or the careful precision of a scientist. He spoke like a man who had spent his life solving practical problems and had little patience for pretense. He told them that Ambassador Okonkwo was right about many things, but wrong about one crucial detail. Humanity's capacity for violence did not arise from fear. It arose from love. The delegates stirred, confused by this statement. Horvath continued, his voice steady and clear. He explained that humans did not fight because they were afraid of dying. They fought because they could not bear the thought of losing what they loved. Their families, their homes, their freedom to choose their own path. Every war humanity had ever fought, every terrible weapon they had ever created, every sacrifice they had ever made, it all came back to that single overwhelming emotion. Love powerful enough to drive them to impossible acts of courage and terrible acts of violence. When the Zephrons had threatened his mining station, Horvath said, he had not been afraid. He had been angry. Angry that someone would presume to take from humans what they had worked so hard to build. Angry that his people, who had only recently escaped the gravity well of their homeworld, who had dreamed of the stars for thousands of years, would be told they did not belong there. That anger had given him the strength to stand against ships that should have crushed him easily. But it was not just anger, he continued. It was love for his crew who trusted him to protect them, love for his species who deserved the chance to make their mark on the cosmos, love for the dream of what humanity could become if given the opportunity to grow. He turned slowly, meeting the eyes of delegates from a dozen different species. He told them that they did not need to fear humanity's weapons or their tactical creativity, or their stubborn refusal to submit. What they needed to understand was that humans would never stop fighting for what they loved. Not because they were violent by nature, but because they cared too deeply to do anything else. The chamber was absolutely silent. Trevin's luminous form had gone still, his thoughts clearly racing. Kelthane's metallic features had arranged themselves into what might have been respect. Even Zavros seemed moved, his forearms drawn close to his body in a gesture of deep contemplation. Dr. Zhang spoke next, his voice gentle after Horvath's intensity. He explained that this capacity for love, this fierce protective instinct, it was what had allowed humanity to survive their harsh world. Earth was not a kind planet. It had tested its children with ice ages and plagues, with droughts and floods, with countless predators and endless challenges. Humans had learned to form bonds with each other because alone, They could not survive. Those bonds had become the foundation of their civilization. Now they carried those bonds with them to the stars. Every human colony, every ship, every outpost, they were all extended families. Attack one and you attacked them all. Threaten their future, and they would respond with everything they had. It was not a choice or a policy or a strategic calculation. It was who they were at the most fundamental level. Ambassador Okonkwo concluded their presentation with a simple message. Humanity wanted peace, wanted friendship, wanted to learn and grow alongside other species, but they would do so as equals, not as subordinates. They would not be bullied or dismissed or told where they could and could not go. They would contribute to galactic civilization in their own way, bringing their unique perspective and their passionate nature to the great conversation that spanned the stars. If the Council could accept that, humanity would be the most loyal ally any species could ask for. But if the Council insisted on trying to contain or control them, they would find that humans could be remarkably stubborn about defending their independence. The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity would be recognized as a full member of the Galactic Council, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. More importantly, the Council acknowledged that perhaps they had been too rigid in their thinking, too comfortable in their ancient ways. The humans brought chaos, yes, but they also brought possibility. They reminded the galaxy that there was more than one path to wisdom, more than one way to approach the challenges of existence. As the human delegation prepared to depart, Savros approached Horvath privately. He asked the captain what he would do now, whether he would return to his mining station or pursue some role in Earth's expanding diplomatic corps. Horvath smiled, the first time anyone had seen him do so. He said he would go back to mining. Someone needed to extract the resources that would build humanity's next generation of ships and stations. Besides, he added with a hint of humor, he had learned that mining equipment made excellent improvised weapons, and that seemed like the sort of knowledge that might prove useful again someday. 5 standard years passed after humanity joined the Galactic Council. In that time, the galaxy learned to adjust to its newest and most unpredictable member. The adjustment was not always smooth, and there were moments when old fears resurfaced, when some species wondered if they had made a terrible mistake by accepting these passionate, chaotic beings into their orderly civilization. But there were also moments of revelation, times when humanity demonstrated that their fierce protective love extended beyond their own species. When the crystalline enclaves faced extinction from a virulent silicon plague, it was human scientists who worked around the clock to develop a cure, driven by the same intensity they brought to everything else. When the harmonious sphere found itself under attack from extragalactic raiders, human military vessels arrived without being asked, their captains simply stating that friends helped friends. The galaxy discovered that humans did not make threats lightly, but they also did not abandon allies easily. Once they decided you were part of their extended family, they would move mountains to protect you. Savros, now in his twilight years as High Chancellor, often reflected on the changes humanity had brought. The council chamber was livelier now, filled with debates that had actual passion behind them rather than the polite exchanges of the past. Younger delegates, inspired by humanity's example, questioned old assumptions and proposed bold new initiatives. The galaxy was growing again, expanding not just physically but intellectually and emotionally. Captain Horvath, true to his word, had returned to mining. But his station in the Outer Terrace had become something of a legend, a place where beings from across the galaxy came to see where humans had first proven themselves. He gave tours occasionally, pointing out the equipment he had modified, telling stories about the battle with a mixture of pride and humility. He never claimed to be a hero, just a man who had done what needed doing. The Zephyron Dominion, after years of bitter silence, finally requested a formal meeting with Earth's government. Lord Commander Zephyron, older now and considerably wiser, traveled to humanity's homeworld. He stood before the United Earth Assembly and did something that no Zephyron had done in 10,000 years of recorded history. He apologized. He spoke of his arrogance, his assumption that age and technological advancement made his species superior. He acknowledged that the Dominion had learned more from their defeat than from any of their countless victories. Humans had taught them that wisdom could come from the young, that strength was not just about weapons and shields, that sometimes the most civilized course of action was to admit you were wrong. The humans, in typical fashion, accepted his apology with grace and then invited him to dinner. Over a meal of Earth cuisine that Zephyron would later describe as alarmingly spicy, but oddly satisfying, the foundations of a genuine friendship were laid. Within a year, the Dominion and humanity had signed a mutual defense pact, creating an alliance that would reshape galactic politics. Trevin, whose initial optimism about humanity had wavered after the Zephyron incident, found his faith restored. He worked closely with Dr. Zhang on a series of cultural exchange programs, helping different species understand each other on a deeper level. He learned that humans were not unique in their capacity for love and protection. Every species had similar drives expressed in different ways. What made humans remarkable was how openly they displayed these emotions, how unashamed they were about caring deeply. Kelthane, the cautious voice who had warned against underestimating humanity, became one of Earth's strongest advocates on the Council. He argued that the galaxy needed humanity's perspective, their willingness to challenge conventional wisdom, their reminder that strength and compassion were not opposing virtues. His own species, he admitted, had grown cold over the millennia, focused on logic and efficiency at the expense of passion. Watching humans taught them to feel again. On Earth itself, the experience of joining galactic civilization had profound effects. Humanity realized that while they were unique in some ways, they were also part of something vastly larger than themselves. The petty conflicts that had plagued their homeworld seemed less important when viewed against the backdrop of a galaxy full of diverse species, each with their own struggles and triumphs. Young humans grew up knowing they were part of a galactic community, that their actions reflected not just on their nation or planet, but on their entire species. It made them more thoughtful, more aware of their impact on others. But it did not diminish their fundamental nature. They were still humans, still capable of fierce love and stubborn determination, still ready to fight for what mattered. Ambassador Okonkwo, now serving as Earth's permanent representative to the Council, gave a speech on the 5th anniversary of humanity's membership. She spoke not of humanity's achievements or challenges, but of gratitude. Gratitude for being given the chance to prove themselves, for being accepted despite their rough edges, for being allowed to contribute their unique voice to the grand chorus of galactic civilization. She told a story about a human child who had written to her, asking if the aliens would like humans once they got to know them. The child's parents had fled violence on Earth, seeking safety in the stars, and the child worried that humanity's violent history would follow them forever. Okonkwo had written back, telling the child that yes, sometimes humans did terrible things, but they also did wonderful things. They loved fiercely, protected loyally, and dreamed impossibly. The aliens, she said, were learning to appreciate all of it, the good and the bad, because that was what made humans real. The council chamber, listening to this story, fell into a contemplative silence. Every species present had their own children, their own fears about the future, their own hopes for what their people could become. In that moment, they understood something profound. Humanity had not joined galactic civilization to change it completely, but to remind it of something it had forgotten. That progress was not just about technology or philosophy, but about staying connected to the deep emotions that made life worth living. Zavros rose to speak, his aged form moving slowly but with dignity. He announced that he would be retiring soon, that it was time for a new generation to lead the council. He had chosen his successor, he said, with the full support of the elder delegates. It would be someone who embodied the new spirit of the council, who understood both the wisdom of ancient civilizations and the passionate energy of younger races, someone who could bridge different perspectives and guide the galaxy forward. He gestured toward the human delegation, and Ambassador Okonkwo stood, confusion and surprise evident on her face. But Zavros was not gesturing at her. He was gesturing at the figure standing beside her. Captain James Horvath, wearing a new uniform this time, the formal attire of a council representative, stepped forward. He looked as uncomfortable as he had 5 years ago, still clearly more at ease with mining equipment than political ceremonies. But he also looked determined, ready to take on this unexpected responsibility. Zavros explained his choice. The galaxy needed a high chancellor who understood that strength came in many forms, who knew when to fight and when to seek peace, who could see the value in every species while still being willing to stand firm against injustice. Horvath had proven all of this during a single desperate battle, and had proven it again through 5 years of quiet service, building bridges between humans and aliens one conversation at a time. The vote was called, and for the first time in 3,000 years the Galactic Council would be led by someone from a species less than a century into space travel. The result was overwhelming. Even the delegates who had initially feared humanity now supported this choice. They had learned what Horvath himself had tried to explain years ago. Humans fought for what they loved, and now they loved this grand experiment in galactic civilization. They would protect it with the same fierce determination they protected everything else that mattered to them. As Horvath accepted the role, he gave a speech much shorter than tradition dictated. He promised to do his best, to listen more than he spoke, to remember that wisdom came from experience but also from fresh perspectives. He promised to never forget where he came from, the mining station where a handful of humans had stood against impossible odds because they refused to be told they did not belong among the stars. Most importantly, he promised that under his leadership, the Council would stand for a simple principle: that every species, young or old, powerful or weak, had the right to exist with dignity and to pursue their dreams without fear. That the galaxy was large enough for everyone, diverse enough to accommodate countless different approaches to life. That strength meant protecting others, not dominating them. The chamber erupted in approval, beings from 1,000 worlds expressing support in 1,000 different ways. And somewhere in a small mining station in the outer terrace, a crew of humans heard the news and celebrated. Their captain had come a long way from improvising weapons out of industrial equipment, but he had never stopped being one of them. A human who loved fiercely and fought stubbornly, who believed in protecting what mattered and standing up for what was right. The galaxy had laughed at Earth's power once, had dismissed humanity as primitive upstarts who did not understand how civilized species behaved. Now they understood the truth. Humans had power not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of their unshakable conviction that love was worth fighting for, that freedom was worth protecting, that dreams were worth pursuing no matter how impossible they seemed. And the galaxy, ancient and wise and tired, found itself renewed by this simple truth. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter, as if celebrating this new chapter in the long story of cosmic civilization. Humanity had arrived, not to conquer or dominate, but to remind everyone what it meant to care deeply about the future. The council adjourned, delegates returning to their homeworlds with stories to tell and lessons to share. But the real story was just beginning, written in the actions of millions of beings across countless stars, all learning to live together with a passion and purpose that humanity had helped them rediscover. And at the center of it all, a former mining station captain stood ready to guide them forward, carrying with him the fierce protective love of his species and the hope that together, all the peoples of the galaxy could build something worth protecting. The laughter had stopped. The begging had ended. Now came the real work of building a future worthy of the dreams they all shared. And humanity, with all their chaos and passion and stubborn determination, would be there every step of the way, making sure no one forgot why any of this mattered in the first place.